I learned how to build websites in Framer in a matter of weeks using one strategy that I don't see a lot of people talking about. So in this video, I'm going to break down exactly what that one strategy is so that you can learn Framer as quickly as possible and start building stunning sites for yourself, your clients, and your customers. My name's Hamza and I'm a web designer and entrepreneur, and learning Framer is what allowed me to build a website template store that generates over $10,000 every month. But the first question is, why Framer? So in 2014, I started my first ever online business, selling instrumentals to recording artists. And for that, I needed a website. But as a new business owner, there was no way that I could afford to hire a web designer. So I decided to learn on my own. But being someone that knows nothing about coding, I started to look for no-code solutions. And at the time, the most popular no-code website builder was WordPress. So I decided to learn it. And after a couple months, I created my first ever website in WordPress. And from that point onwards, it was my go-to web design tool for the next 9 years. Now, WordPress is great, but if you've ever used it, you know that between hosting, plugins, themes, licensing, it can all get quite jarring. And I always felt it was a bit limiting when it came to truly custom high-end designs. But it was all I knew. So around 18 months ago, I was on a sales call with a potential web design client. And on the call, he said to me, "Do you think that we can build my website in Framer?" And I said, "What's Framer?" And he shared his screen and showed me, and without really giving it a proper look, I immediately brushed it off thinking, nah, it's just another crappy website builder. And I convinced him that WordPress was the way to go. And reluctantly, we agreed the deal. But after the call, I was curious. So I went onto Framer's website, and after taking a proper look around, I was like, whoa. The websites people were building using it looked a whole nother level compared to WordPress. So without even thinking, just from sheer excitement, I messaged the client and said to him, "Do you know what? Let's build the site in Framer." So I made a Framer account straight away, thinking this is going to be easy. And then I got dropped into the canvas and immediately I thought, what the is this? Everything felt completely foreign to me. The canvas, the toolbars, the layouts, everything. Obviously, I knew that there was going to be some learning curve, but nothing felt familiar to me. So I started clicking about, and after a few minutes, I was like, nope, it's not for me. I'm going back to WordPress. But then I remembered that I'd already told the client that I'd do it. So going back on my word now would completely throw my credibility and potentially the whole deal out the window. So I backed myself into a wall, and I resorted to what any of us would in this situation: YouTube. I started looking for any and all Framer tutorials, and while watching, Framer began to feel more and more daunting. The difference between WordPress and Framer was massive to me. So at that point, I knew I really only had two options: either slog through hours of tutorials hoping that I'd just pick it up, or buy a course and try and accelerate the process. But with the pressure of this project on my head, I decided that a course would probably be the best bet. So I started to Google for a Framer course, but I came across something very interesting: the Framer Template Marketplace. And it hit me. What if I just used templates to learn? Instead of learning from scratch, I could see exactly how things were put together piece by piece and then just reverse engineer them. And that way, not only would I be learning Framer, but I would also be putting the theory to practice at the same time, which could save me hours. So that's exactly what I decided to do. So let's break down what I did step by step. The first thing was choosing a template. Now, the Framer Marketplace has hundreds of templates to choose from simple landing pages to bigger, more complex websites, with some templates being free and others paid. As a beginner, I was obviously more inclined to stick with free templates. It was the best way to get a feel for how Framer worked without spending anything. And there are some insane free templates on the marketplace. But as great as some free templates are, I knew that if I really wanted to understand the full potential of Framer, I'd need to look at some paid templates as well. The paid templates generally had more complex layouts, transitions, and interactions, which really opened my eyes to Framer's capabilities. So I actually ended up investing a fair bit of money in paid templates. Now, when it came to picking a template to learn from, it was important to me to choose a template that was similar to what I wanted to create. This kept things focused so that I was actually learning things that I could transfer directly into the project that I was working on, which would help things stick a little bit more in my head. So if you're new to Framer, my advice would be to pick a template that fits the type of site that you want to build. That will make the whole learning process a lot smoother and digestible. Once I had the templates I needed, the next step was to jump into Framer, and that's where the real learning began. I knew that just looking at a finished template wouldn't teach me much, so I needed to break things down piece by piece. My whole process was pretty simple, but it was effective. I'd pick a section like the top part of the page and start looking at each piece. Buttons, text, images, videos, anything that made up the section, and see how it was set up. I wanted to understand how these parts work together and what settings were used to make everything look and function the way they did. It took a bit of trial and error, but by focusing on these details, I quickly started to see how Framer worked and how each piece fit together. And once I got the hang of doing that, I would take it a step further. I'd move things around, adjust settings, and even play with simple animations to see how these changes affected the design. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it broke things completely, but that's how I learned. And everything could be fixed with a simple undo anyway, so it was the perfect playground to learn. Experimenting like this helped me understand how Framer handles different elements and really made me so much more comfortable in using the tool. So if you're trying this approach, don't worry about trying to make everything perfect. The goal is to explore, make changes, and see what each adjustment does. Every change you make teaches you a little more about how Framer works. But breaking down the template taught me the theory, which was great, but it was this next step that really glued it all together in my head. I'd rebuild the entire template from scratch without copying anything over. But this wasn't as scary as it sounds. My process involved going back and forth between the original template and my new project. And I'd look at each section in the original, switch over to the blank canvas and literally try to recreate it piece by piece. This back and forth approach made a massive difference for me. It forced me to really think about how each part should look, how elements worked, and which settings I needed to adjust. The more I recreated, the more everything started to click. All that theory I learned in the last step started to make sense. But of course, there were times where I got stuck. Sometimes an element wouldn't line up or I couldn't achieve a specific effect. But when that happened, I didn't just guess my way through it. I went online to find answers and I used resources like the Framer Academy or the Framer community to work my way through the issues. Being able to solve real issues made a big difference. Every time I worked through a problem, it helped me understand Framer on a deeper level and really embed those principles that I learned into my head. So if you're serious about learning Framer, I would definitely recommend trying this approach. Start with a template, break it down, and then rebuild it section by section. And don't hesitate to look for help if you get stuck. And after doing this a few times, I already felt so much more comfortable inside of Framer. And within 2 or 3 weeks of doing this, I made the switch from WordPress to Framer permanently. And I haven't made a website in WordPress since. But once you've learned Framer, naturally the next thing that you're probably wondering is how can you monetize this skill and start making some money from it? So check out this video where I break down 5 ways that you can start to make over $1,000 per month with Framer. I'll see you there.